Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to do chapter 4. We're still in chapter 4. We're going to take a little bit of a diversion and we're going to review factoring, because factoring is probably one of the most important concepts that you can do in algebra, in either in Algebra 1 or Algebra 2. So your objectives for the day are going to be review the distributive property. We've actually been doing this already, but we're going to do just a couple more problems. So we're going to review the distributive property, and then we're going to review a factoring method called the AC method. And I think I've watched some of you factor and you've done it a slightly different way, but this is the method, this is the way I learned what it was called, and so that's what I'm going to call it. And then if you guys have a better way to factor, then you may do that. The goal is to get the correct answer. So that's what we're going to work on today. Alright, so those are your objectives for the day. So now let's start with the distributive property. And we've already been doing this, so this is just a little bit of a review. So there's the distributive property. Okay, we have been using it to put a quadratic in standard form. And for right now, what we're going to do is just manage the distributive property, and then we will go back to quadratics in a day or so. Alright, so if I have x plus 3 and I want to multiply that by 2x minus 7, I can do that with the distributive property. So I could do FOIL, first, outside, inside, last, and I'm okay if you use that method, but I am going to do the box, and we've been using the box for a few days. So here's my box. I'm going to put the x plus 3 at the top and 2x minus 7 on the side. Now I'm going to distribute. Alright, so my first cell is going to be 2x squared. If I go down, this is a negative 7x. This 2 times 3 is 6x, and this is a negative 21. Remember, my like terms are along the diagonal, so this is going to simplify to be 2x squared, a negative 7 and a positive 6 is a 1x, and then minus 21. And then that first little problem is done. Alright, so let's move on to an example, because we've been doing these, so now let's make it a little bit more entertaining. So what if I want you to simplify, and I'm going to give you x minus 3, and then I'm going to do x squared plus 2x plus 7. So this is a little bit different than what you've been doing so far, because now I have two terms, a binomial, multiplied by three terms, a trinomial. So I'm still going to use a box. You could still do FOIL if you wanted. I think a box, you're going to make less mistakes, and it doesn't matter whether you put the 3 thing on the top or if you put it on the bottom. So here is my box, 3 columns, and then I'm going to have my x and my minus 3. Alright, so if we start filling in our box, this is x cubed minus 3x squared plus 2x squared minus 6x plus 7x and a minus 21. And then now I have two different, oops, pen didn't work, two different sets of diagonals where my terms are alike. So now if I simplify, I have x cubed, and negative 3 and a positive 2 is a negative 1x squared, 7 minus 6 plus 1x, and then minus 21. So it's actually a great method to manage bigger problems. Okay? Alright, so let's do one more example. Same idea. So I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to have x plus 4 and I'm going to multiply it by 3x squared minus 2x plus 5. So again, it's the same process. I'm going to do it in a box because I think you'll make less mistakes. I like to put my 3 thing up top. Doesn't matter, you can do it either way. That's just the way I like to do it. And then I'm going to put my x plus 4 on the side. So if I start multiplying through, I'm going to get 3x cubed plus 12x squared minus 2x squared minus 8x plus 5x and then plus 20. So again, here's a set of like terms, here's a set of like terms. So I can combine. I get 3x cubed, 12 minus 2 is 10x squared. A negative 8 and a positive 5 is a minus 3x, and then nothing is alike with the number, so then I'm done. Alright, so now's your first problem, and it's going to be one of our distribution problems, which should be fairly straightforward. So I want you to simplify. So you're going to pause the video, and then you're going to do your first problem. It's very similar to the 2 examples we've just done. And I want you to simplify x squared plus 2x plus 6 multiplied by x minus 3. That's going to be the a. Sorry, I forgot to put the a in there. And then the b has the same directions also to simplify. And I'm going to simplify 2x squared minus 3x minus 10 multiplied by 3x plus 4. So those are your first 2 A and B to do on problem number 1. So pause your video and then make sure you report your answers, underline them, something so I know where your answers are. Alright, so now as we keep going, when we move through, we're going to do the opposite of the distributive property. So the opposite of the distributive property is factoring. Okay, that's kind of the F word of math. People don't like to factor, but it really is an important skill for us to learn. So I'm going to teach you, I'm going to do the same problem twice. I'm going to do a method called guess and test the first time. I'll talk you through my decision processes, and then I'm going to show you the AC method. And it is my opinion that most of my students like to do the AC method. Different books call it different things, but let's just start with an example. So my first example says to factor. And I'm going to do it the first time using a method called guess and test. And this was how I learned it all those millions of years ago. And if I have x squared plus 4x minus 21, I need to evaluate what I have and see what characteristics I have. I need to find the factors of 21 that are going to subtract to give me 4. This tells me that both signs are going to be different, so I'm going to have one positive, one negative. This plus tells me that the biggest number is going to be positive. So if I factor this, my factors of 21 are 7 and 3, and 21 and 1. So my two pairs are 7 and 3, 21 and 1. This one doesn't work, so then I'm going to use the 7 and the 3. So I'm going to make the 7 positive because it's positive here, and then I'm going to do x minus 3 here. Then I'm going to check my work. 7 minus 3 is 4, and then 7 times a negative 3 is a negative 21. The problem with this method is that you have to visualize what's happening and kind of be able to see the number combinations. Some people are really good at guess and test. Many people are not. So since people are not, then we use a method called the AC method. So it's the same basic process, but I'm going to show you and write down all the steps. Alright, so if I have x squared plus 4x minus 21, and I'm told to factor. So now I'm going to teach you the AC method. My A is 1, my B is 4, and my C is a negative 21. And that's just using the coefficients from our quadratic formula. So we've already seen that information in the past. Okay? Alright, so since it's called the AC method, the first step is to multiply A and C together. So I'm going to multiply A and C. So when I do, I get 1 times a negative 21, which is a negative 21. The second step in the AC method is to find the factors, which is easy because we've already done the problem another way, of the product of A and C that will add or subtract to give the middle term. And the middle term is always going to be the term that has a 1 for a power. So in this case, it's going to be the 4x. So my number combinations for the 21 are going to be a positive 7 and a negative 3, because that gives me a negative 21. 21 and 1 will not give me 4, and I check by doing 7 minus 3, and then that is my positive 4. And I'll just put the x so you know which term I'm looking at. Okay? So now that I've found the factors that I'm going to use, I'm going to do those two. The next step is to rewrite the middle term, and we're going to use the values from number 2. Okay, and I'll put a circle so you know I'm talking about step number 2. So I'm going to rewrite my original equation, so it's going to be x squared plus 7x, and then here's the negative 3x, and then there's the 21. And if you'll notice, the sum of those two things is 4x. So all I did was rewrite the middle term in this manner. Okay? The next step is to group. Okay, so I'm going to put my x squared and my 7x together, and then I'm going to put a plus, and I'm going to do my negative 3x and the negative 21. The first two terms always go together. The second two terms always go together. Now I'm going to factor each one of those little equations. So now I'm going to factor. So in this one, both terms have an x in common, so I'm going to factor it out. So x squared divided by x is x, and 7x divided by x is 7. In this one, I'm going to factor out a negative 3 because my x coefficient always needs to be 1 and positive, and I'm going to get an x plus 7. So now if you'll notice, these things look a lot alike. So now I'm going to factor again, but now I'm going to take out an x plus 7 because that's what this term and this term have in common. So I'm going to factor out the x plus 7, and I'm going to be left with an x and a minus 3. And now you're done. And we get the exact same thing that we did when we factored using the previous method. So see, here's our result from the previous method, and then this is our result from this method. Okay, so I'm going to do another couple of these examples so you can see on different problems how to manage the AC method. Alright, so for our next example, okay, sorry, let me get my page back where it needs to be. So here's our next one. I want you to factor x squared minus 6x plus 5. So that would be our next task. I am going to do it with the AC method, just to make sure that you understand how it works. So I'm going to do the AC method. So the first thing is to multiply A and C, so it's going to be 1 times 5, which is 5. So now I need to find the factors of 5 that give me the middle term. So I could do a -5 and a -1, and a -5 minus a 1 would give me the -6. Because this is positive, both of these have to have the same sign, and because this is negative, then that means both terms have to be negative, because two negatives makes a positive. Alright? My next step is to rewrite the middle term. Alright, so for the second step, it's going to be x squared. I'm going to use this information, minus 5x, minus 1x, and then plus 5. I notice again that this is that middle term, negative 6x. I've just rewritten it in a different fashion. The next step is to group. So I'm going to group x squared minus 5x. I'm going to put those guys together. I'm going to put a plus, and then I'm going to have these two guys grouped together. So again, it's always the first two terms and the last two terms. Now I'm going to factor. I'm going to do this a couple of times. These two terms both have an x in common, and I'm going to get x minus 5. I'm going to take out a -1 in this one, which changes the signs, x minus 5. Okay, now I'm going to factor one more time. They have an x minus 5 in common, and I'm going to be left with an x minus 1, and then you're done. Okay, it's kind of a cool method. It takes a little bit longer than doing the method called guess and test, and I believe that this is, I've seen people in other classes factoring using the box, so I think it's the same method, just without using a box. Alright, let's do another example, just because sometimes this takes a little while to sink in. Alright, so for my next example, we're going to do 3x squared plus 10x minus 8. Alright, so my A is 3, my B is 10, and my C is a -8. First step is to multiply A and C together. So if I do that, I'm going to get 3 times a -8, which is a -24. And a -24 has several different factors, but remember, we're looking for factors that are going to add or subtract to give me the 10. So I can get a -24 by doing a -6 and a +4. I could have a -12 and a +2, and I believe that one's going to work, because let's change the signs just to make it work. I have a +12 and a -2, which is the -24, and 12 minus 2 is 10. So I'm going to stop. I'm not going to try other options because that one worked. And I'm going to rewrite the middle term. So it's going to be 3x squared plus 12x, leave a little bit of space, minus 2x, and then minus 8. And notice that that is 10x. So all we did was rewrite the middle term. The next step is to group. So I'm going to group 3x squared and 12x. Those two guys are going to go together. Put my plus, and then I'm going to have a -2x minus 8, and those two guys are going to go together. Now we factor. These two terms have a 3 in common and an x in common, and if I factor it out, I'm going to get x plus 4. These two terms both have a -2 in common, so if I take that out, I get x plus 4, because a -8 divided by a -2 is a +4. I factor one more time, because now they have x plus 4 in common, and I'm left with 3x minus 2, and there is the factored form of that quadratic. Okay? All right, so that's our factored form, so that one's done. Alrighty, so now I'm going to give you your second problem. You're actually going to do 4 problems today. Okay, so this is problem number 2. You're going to pause the video and you're going to factor these 2 problems. The first one is factor, and then you're going to get x squared minus 2x minus 35. I don't care how you do it. You can do guess and test, you could do the box, or you could do the AC method. I recommend practicing the AC method because it's helpful when the numbers get bigger. Right, and then your b is going to be x squared plus 3x minus 10. So now you need to pause the video and do those 2 problems. Alright, I'm going to do 2 more examples and then today is done, just to make sure that you have additional things if you need it for reference. So this one says factor, and we're going to do 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. And again, I'm going to show the AC method just to make sure that you understand it. Okay? Alright, so I know that this is my A, this is the B, and then there is my C. The first step is to do A times C, so that's going to be 2 times a negative 3, which is a negative 6. Okay? And then I need to find the factors of a negative 6 that are going to give me 5. And remember, it has to be the factors of the negative 6. So I could do a negative 6 and a positive 1. I could do a positive 6 and a negative 1. Okay? I'm not choosing the 2 and the 3 because the negative tells me that I need to subtract. This positive tells me that the larger of the 2 numbers is positive, which means that's the option that I'm going to choose. Okay? The next step is to rewrite the middle term. So I get 2x squared plus 6x, leave some space, there's the negative 1x, and then minus 3. And again, there's your middle term written in a different manner. Okay? Now I'm going to group, and I'm going to do 2x squared plus 6x, those guys are going to be grouped, and then negative 1x minus 3. Now I'm going to factor. Don't need the s. So I have a 2 and an x in common. I'm going to factor it out to get x plus 3. Then I'm going to take out a negative 1. The negative 1 is going to change the signs x plus 3. I'm going to factor one more time. And I'm going to take out the x plus 3. And I'm left with 2x minus 1. And then you're done. Okay? Alright, I have one last example, and I'm just going to talk my way through guess and test because that would be the method that I would use if it were me. So if I had x squared plus 4x minus 32 and I want to do guess and test, I need to find the factors of 32 that subtract to give me 4. So 32, the first thing that comes to mind is 8 and a negative 4. The bigger number is positive. So 8 times a negative 4 is a negative 32. 8 minus 4 is a positive 4. So my factors, if I take care of the x squareds first, and then I put in my factors, there's 8 and there's a negative 4, and then I'm done. So guess and test is significantly faster, but can be difficult for some people. Okay? I'm okay either way, whichever way you can get the right answer. So if I check my math, here's the x squared. 8 minus 4 is 4. 8 times a negative 4 is a negative 32. Alright? And I'll show you the AC method kind of abbreviated. So you already know that the 8 and the negative 4 work. So if I rewrote my terms, it would be x squared plus 8x minus 4x minus 32. and then I'm going to group, and I would group those two and those two. So it's going to be x squared plus 8x, and then there's my plus, and then the negative 4x minus 32. Now I'm going to factor. These both have an x in common, x plus 8, and then I'm going to take out a negative 4 to get x plus 8. Almost done. Factor out the x plus 8, and then I get x minus 4. And I got the same answer. Significantly faster doing guess and test, but guess and test is difficult for some, easy for others. So whichever method works best for you is the method that you should use. Alright, this one's done. Make sure you do your video problems and take good notes.